My name is Logan. I'm 23. I am Chinese, Mauritian American. My gender identity is non-binary transmasculine.
My name is Ariane. I am 21 years old and I identify as queer and I am a cisgendered woman.
I am Christina and I'm 21. I am both white and Mexican American, and my gender identity, I would say, is between being a woman and sort of gender non-existent, gender nothing, I guess.
My name is Mia. I'm 21 years old. I'm Asian, but I'm also mixed race. I'm Taiwanese, and I guess white is my other half. And I'm polyamorous.
I identified as a lesbian, but now since my gender identity has changed, I would label my sexuality as queer because sexual orientation is just so fluid.
So I started using queer because I really just didn't want to offend anyone, and it's the most inclusive term, and I don't want anyone to feel like they're not welcome in my existence.
I think being a slut is definitely part of my identity. It's not just like, oh, you just have all these people that you hook up with, which is fine as well, and I know people that do that, but for me, I'm demisexual, so my partners tend to have like a closeness with me where they feel like a very close friend.
I'm a lesbian. I'll do a serious take for that one. Even if I only identify partially as a woman, or as gender fluid, the only like real attraction I feel or any desire to like be in a relationship I feel is with women. So I still feel very much like a lesbian.
I grew up in South Pass. My parents consider me their daughter, even though I don't identify with that. But I've been grooming my brother to be more understanding of things that aren't just heteronormative, cisnormative. So I've been telling him to call me his sibling instead of his sister. It makes me really happy when he does call me his sibling.
So I grew up in Orange County, which is woefully conservative, and very white, which is interesting for being a black person. My family was usually pretty open-minded. Before I came out, there was always the occasional queer joke or homophobia that's very casual, that's always the most damaging in my opinion. So it was like that, but it wasn't a lot to the point where it discouraged me completely from coming out eventually. The role that I generally play is one that's trying to keep my whole family fairly educated and aware of the environment that we occupy as people of color, but also as parents and sisters of a queer person.
It was mostly my grandparents that raised me, on my Taiwanese side, along with my brother. They would watch us after school, they would feed us, they would do everything for us. So I think that influenced my race identity.
I grew up in Houston, Texas, and in South Pasadena, California. My mom's like my best friend. She said that when I was a kid, whenever I would fall down, and like scrape my knee or whatever, her reaction would always be like, suck it up. Is that she wanted to kind of raise me to be tougher because she knew that there was misogyny in the world, and she wanted to make sure that I was able to like handle that, along with scraped knees or whatever. My mother and her side of the family is Catholic, so my brother and I were both brought up and we went to Catholic school. When I was around middle school, I started to question Catholicism and I started to question my faith, and it was at the same time that I was questioning my sexuality. I had seen a lot of homophobia in the church and in followers of it. So I kind of, at that time when I was figuring out that I was gay, I was kind of thinking, well, if they don't want me, then they don't have me. But then as I grew older, I saw people who were gay and who were religious, who were Christian and Catholic, and who didn't feel the need to separate themselves from either of those things. So that sort of inspired me to go back to my faith because I still did believe and it was still important to me. So I realized that I could be gay and Catholic and happy in both.
Ever since I was little, I have wondered what it would be like to have a penis. When playing with friends on the playground, I would either take the role of the father while playing house or the baby. A lot of Asian culture is denying or avoiding things. I've come out to my parents maybe 4 or 5 times. They don't fully understand my gender identity. I haven't told them precisely what I identify as, although I have made a post on Facebook and both of them have liked it, but they have not acknowledged it.
When I was like a teenager for a while, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to write and direct. So I spent a lot of time watching movies and focusing on that. And I did sort of look for gay themes in movies and TV, even before I kind of knew that I was gay. That was always something I was kind of excited to see. I always very much liked romance in any story that I was like watching or reading or anything. That was just like my favorite part. But I remember just stuff like I would watch a lot of media that had like female protagonists, and they would always have like, the best friend. But then they would both end up having male love interests. But I was always kind of like, but they're already so close. Why would they want boyfriends?
I've been in many failed and awful monogamous relationships, and that definitely made me realize that that's not for me, or that's not how I was meant to have relationships. So that definitely steered me towards polyamorous. Polyamory to me is just not being tied down to one person. But I think that can be taken in so many different ways. For me, yeah, I do have a main partner.
I was very aware of myself and my sexuality from a very young age. When you're growing up, when you're a kid, there aren't a lot of openly queer people around you. So I came to terms with my sexuality alone. It wasn't something that I was taught to hate, because I don't think anyone really expected it. And then when I did come out, I had to come out multiple times to my parents because they were just like, oh, it's just a phase, it's just a phase. I've always known, so there's a lot of confidence in my queerness that has really transformed who I am, because that confidence kind of transferred to my confidence now just as a person.
Apparently I had a type, mostly white women, fairly thin, but as I've grown up, I've realized that I've been conditioned to think that way and to be attracted to this specific type of person. I think it's really important for people to really think about the Eurocentric beauty standards and reject it. And since realizing that, I've been trying to decolonize my mind.
I never saw myself in the media I was consuming, so I didn't have to identify with it. So I was allowed to exist without adhering to expectations of my body or anything else. When it is presented to me that I'm not being or presenting black enough, I get angry because it's something I've had to work against, being too black for white spaces or too white for black spaces. But then it's overcome with my confidence in myself as a black person, because there's no such thing as not being black enough. I am black, that's it, full stop. I was never afraid of my queerness. I was more like waiting, because I felt that being attracted to women was something that wasn't for me yet, so it was a lot of anticipation and kind of trying to fight against that belief that I had.
So I think growing up is definitely discouraged to embrace my culture, being mixed race, being Taiwanese, and part white. Like, why don't you embrace that? That's like super privileged, like take hold of that and kind of like dump aside like being Asian. I'm just scared of dealing with like the fetishism. This guy told me that was hitting on me. He asked me, he's like, oh, what are you? Like the typical question for racially ambiguous people. So I'm like, yeah, Taiwanese and Spanish, or like white. And he's like, oh, that's the good kind. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? I was like exotic, but not like too exotic.
And everything that you'll see in the media is with very thin, usually white people. And so the idea, like all the sex that I ever saw was the woman at least involved. She was toned, she was skinny. Even now, like I still struggle with the idea of like making myself vulnerable to another person and letting them see me like if I'm not 100% like shaved, waxed, makeup on, hair blown out, because sex seems like this performance, and it's still like something that's like in the back of my mind constantly.
As an Asian, non-binary, trans-masculine person, I feel like the world views me still as feminine, and it sucks. And it also puts people in a position of discomfort, because I'm not the typical, Asian girl that goes to college and is like super pretty with long hair and super feminine. I'm the exact opposite. And so my queerness and my gender identity is a constant rebellion against all of that.
My girlfriend Christina she is non-binary, and that was something that I never really understood before we got together, and so I've actively tried to understand her existence as a non-binary person, but as well all of her friends that I've been introduced to. They are all huge influences on me as I grow. I definitely look to all of them to see, you know, what they're doing and how I can better myself as a person, and it's kind of a cooperative effort, I think, because at the same time that I'm doing that, I think they're doing that with their peers and things like that. And so it's a very communal growth, I guess you could say. We're lucky enough to be alive when it is being a lot more embraced, and I sought out environments that let me kind of exist in a way that was maybe contrary to what heteronormativity dictates.
Like people of like my own like race or ethnicity, along with other like people of color, they still all idolize like white women or white men, even like they reject like their own race or ethnicity. I think it took me a while to realize that like I am beautiful and practice self-love, because in South Pasadena it's mostly white and not to mention wealthy, so I felt like that, and those were the people that were like idolized as like beautiful, and I felt like I didn't match that whatsoever.
As a white Latina non-binary female lesbian, I don't have any of the negative sort of racist experiences that other Latino people do have. But as a lesbian, I do kind of like worry, like even if I'm however proud I want to be of my sexuality, there's always that fear, like when I'm in public, if I'm like holding hands with my girlfriend or anything like that, like what if this is the day, you know? But you know, it's kind of that like mentality where you just have to put up this like tough like act of like, you know, fuck them if they think bad about me.
I'm a political science major, and my focus is on race studies, and it's just something that I'm always looking through a lens and looking at how people treat other people based on race. And I feel like I just take that into account when it comes to like, yeah, like my partners and just my in general relationships. I base like how they treat other people based on race, and whether or not they're gonna be a partner, be a friend, or whether or not I wanna like associate myself with them.
I think I would instill a lot of cognitive dissonance in the world, because I am a black person, yes, but I don't fit any stereotype. I actively try not to. It's kind of like a big gray area, which is not something that a lot of people would like, but it's something I get a kick out of, because I've never liked being one thing, because just as diverse as I am as a person, I'm Japanese, I'm black, I'm a queer woman, all of these things kind of operate in my existence, so using queer as kind of that umbrella terms helps me exist as a person without having to exist as a certain kind of person.
Both my sexual identity and my gender identity play a huge role in how I view the world and how I interact with other people and myself on the daily. It forces me to reevaluate everything that I've learned growing up in a really small, mostly white community with parents that adhere to cis and heteronormative aspects of life.
Finding queer communities, finding like-minded people lets you exist in a way that the world at large doesn't. It's a hugely liberating way to identify, and it's a hugely liberating way to operate in the world, because it makes you, as a stipulation to your identity, more socially aware, because you have to be. And that is, I think, the most important thing about my queerness, is that it has mandated that I be a better, more open-minded person. Because if you want to exist and contribute meaningfully to queer communities, you have to be very aware of any kind of internalized notions you have about gender or sexuality or even race, because those things, they can't inhibit how you treat people in the queer community, because the queer community won't let it.